Hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll be tackling the question type that involves having multiple charts. So you might be given a line graph and a bar chart, or a pie chart and a table, or a table and a line graph, or any combination of those. Lots of students find these the most difficult to do, but they really don't need to be. This video will explain how to go about answering these. Thankfully, we can actually use the exact same writing process, so there's nothing new to remember here. However, there are a few tips to think about when you are looking at more than one chart. So the first thing to remember is not to get overwhelmed. Don't let the fact that you have two sets of data in front of you, two pie charts or a pie chart and a line graph, don't let that confuse you and make you panic. Remember, you're still only looking for key features. So you're looking for the most obvious things that you can see in those charts. So even though you might be looking at a lot of information, you do not have to write about all of it. You're still only picking out key features. So do not try to write about all of the data. The examiners want to know that you understand the data, and the fact that you leave out a lot of information means that you know what the important information is that you are going to write about. So the way to structure your answer is to do the introduction as normal, write an overview paragraph as normal, and your details paragraphs, you'll still have two details paragraphs, but you'll simply pick out two key features from each of the charts you're looking at. So if you've got a line graph and a table, you'll pick out the two key features from the line graph and two key features from the table. You'll then write about those in more detail to create your details paragraph. So that's what we need to consider when we've got multiple charts in our IELTS Writing Task 1 questions. Let's take a look at an example now. So the opening statement for this question reads, the pie chart below shows the main reasons why agricultural land becomes less productive. The table shows how these causes affected 3 regions of the world during the 1990s. So we can see the pie chart at the top, causes of worldwide land degradation, and there are 4 categories we've got, and they're labelled with percentages. And the table is titled Causes of Land Degradation by Region. We've got the regions down the left, North America, Europe and Oceania, and we've got total land degraded on the right hand side column, and in between we've got the causes of land degradation in percentages. So we've got a variety of information to look at, but we need to simply pick out 2 key features from each. So starting with the pie chart, the 2 things I would pick out are that, well, there are 3 major causes of land degradation worldwide, aren't there? And they're quite even, really. So that's overgrazing, or overcultivation, and deforestation. They're at similar amounts, and they're obviously the major causes. So that's one key feature. I might also mention that the leading cause is overgrazing, so I might mention that. For the table, I'm going to say that Europe has suffered the most land degradation. It's got 23% there, so that's the highest. And North America has suffered the least, with just 5%. That's quite a lot less. Um, and there are a variety of causes. So they are the four things that I'm going to pick out as my key features. Now for the introduction. As normal, we're simply going to use synonyms to create our introduction. It's a little longer than normal as there are two sentences that we need to look at. So this time I've changed it to: the pie chart presents the main causes of the decreased productivity of farmland. The table reveals what the impact of this degradation were on three areas of the world between the years of 1990 to 2000. So you can see some synonyms in action again there. Main reasons, main causes, shows, presents, agricultural land, farmland, um, decreased productivity, less productive, um, how these causes affected, so what the impact of this is, um, and during the 1990s, between the years 1990 to 2000. So simply used synonyms again there in the usual manner. Next, we're going to add the overview paragraph. So we've got our key features all ready to use, and this time I've put them together in the following paragraph. Overall, there are three major causes of land degradation which have decreased productivity of land worldwide. Europe has suffered more than any other country in this regard, and Oceania and North America have also been affected. So there we go. I've mentioned most of the key features there. I've left out the variety of causes. I didn't want to make it much longer than the two sentences I've got there. So it's fine as it is as an overview. And finally, we're going to add the details paragraphs. So the first details paragraph is relating to the pie chart only, and that reads: overgrazing is the leading cause of land degradation worldwide, with just over a third of all degraded land due to this one factor alone. Clearing of trees comes a close second, causing 30% of land degradation, and over farming is also a significant contributor at 28%. It's worth noticing here that I've used the phrase just over a third rather than saying 35%. I've done this to show the examiner that I have a variety of vocabulary and I don't need to just list percentages. So that's a useful tip to remember. Also, I have used synonyms for some of the words from the pie chart and table. I've put in clearing of trees rather than deforestation, and over farming rather than over cultivating. So I have also remembered to use some synonyms to put some variety into my language there as well. And the second details paragraph reads: interestingly, Europe has had a very significant 23% of its total landmass degraded, Oceania 13%, and North America being much less affected, with just 5% of its landmass being damaged. So again, I've used a synonym, damaged rather than degraded there. And I've mentioned that the 23% is very significant. I could also have said that I could have used a quarter rather than saying 23%. I could have said nearly a quarter of its total land mass. That would have been another option as well. So I've used all of the information is the obvious information from either of the two charts, and I've put them together in the same way that I would do for all of the um, individual questions that have only one individual visual data source. So there is no need to get scared when you get given a question with two visual data sources in it. Let's look at one more question with multiple data sources, just to make sure we get the idea of this. So this question reads, the pie charts and table give information about the total value and sources of fish imported to the US between 1988 and the year 2000. And there we can see a table and the pie chart underneath, several pie charts. So as always, you need to make sure you understand the question. So reread the opening statement. So it's talking about the total value and sources of fish imported to the US. So the table, we've got the years 1988 to 1992 and the year 2000. So notice that the years are not evenly spread out. We've got a 4-year gap and then an 8-year gap. So that's worth considering. It then jumps 6.57, 8.52, and then 10. So that second jump there from 8.52 to 10.72 is over 8 years, not over 4 years. So that's worth noticing as well. The pie charts, we've got the years, the same years, 88, 92, and 2000. And the key, we've got Canada in dark blue, China in grey, and other sources in light blue. So let's see if we can pick out some key features. First, let's go back to the table. So key features of the table. Well, it's going to be that the total value in billions of dollars has increased a lot. It's increased dramatically, hasn't it? It's nearly doubled. So it's gone from 6 to 10 over the 12 years. So that's a big increase. So that's going to be one of my key features. Um, we can also see that the biggest increase occurred between 1988 and 1992. So it's a $2 billion increase in those 4 years. The next 2 billion is over an 8-year time period. So that's quite significant. The pace of growth was higher between 88 and 92. So that's a key feature as well. Turning to the pie charts now then. Well, the most obvious thing is that Canada's market share has dramatically decreased, whereas China's has dramatically increased. And both of those are very easy to spot and pick out, so they will be our key features for the pie charts there. So as ever, you never pick out more than 4 key features in total. 2 from one data source and 2 from the other data source. So now we can move on to the introduction and interview paragraphs. This time I've changed the sentence so that it reads, the visual data provided presents information regarding the overall value and origins of fish brought into America from between 1988 and 2000. So rather than saying pie charts and table, I've just said visual data. Rather than saying give, I've used presents. Rather than saying about, I've used regarding. Rather than saying total value, I've used overall value. I could have said revenue, perhaps. Instead of saying sources, I've used origins. Instead of saying imported, I've used brought into. And rather than saying the US, I've said America. So using simple direct synonyms, I've been able to write a nice little introduction to this answer. Next, we'll use our key features to formulate our overview paragraph. So there are the key features we picked out, and here is the overview paragraph, once again starting with overall, so that the examiner knows that this is our overview paragraph. And it reads, overall, the total revenue of the US imported fish industry nearly doubled in value, with the most dramatic increase occurring during the earlier part of that time period. As regards the sources of imported fish, Canada's market share was cut in half, in contrast to China's, which more than doubled over the same time period. So, I've made the changes clear there, but I haven't used any specific numbers. I've just used phrases such as nearly doubled or was cut in half and more than doubled. So that gives a good indication of what happened, but is not specific. So it's still providing us with a simple overview. And notice again, we've used synonyms and varied the vocabulary where we could. So fish industry rather than fish market, total revenue rather than total value. We've gone back to saying imported fish rather than the origins of fish. So just varying the vocabulary to make sure that it shows off the different words that we do know. Next, we need to add the details paragraphs, and we're going to organize this logically so that one paragraph is going to be about the table and the other paragraph will be about the pie charts. So, the first detailed paragraph reads, the figure for the total value of the fish market grew dramatically from a starting point of $6.57 billion in 1998 to $8.52 billion by 1992, before a further surge took it to $10.72 billion by the year 2000. Notice the use of descriptive vocabulary adverbs like dramatically and a further surge. They add a bit more description and detail to the specific details that we have already included. And the second paragraph reads, China's contribution to this market grew rapidly, from 13% to just under a third of the entire market during the 12-year time frame. On the other hand, Canada's market share suffered greatly, dropping significantly from 60% to just 28%, with 26% of that loss occurring between the years of 1988 and 1992. So we've used the phrase on the other hand there, and that shows that we're comparing China to Canada. So it's quite relevant to compare the two here. Remember, we are asked to compare relevant pieces of information, and it's certainly relevant to compare China and Canada's progress in this market. So we've also varied our vocabulary here. Notice I've said from 13% to just under a third of the entire market. I could have said to 30%, but again I want to vary my vocabulary a little bit, so I've said to just under a third of the entire market. Notice I've also in the last sentence, right at the end, added the detail that 26% of that loss occurred between the years of 1988 and 1992. So it's quite significant, that is. It's quite noticeable that most of the loss occurred during those years. So it would be important to include that detail here, as it is significant. So there we go. We've added our details paragraphs. We've got 4 nicely formed paragraphs, our introduction, overview, and 2 details paragraphs, written using the same procedure that we use for all of the different questions.